Shalom everyone and welcome to Busisiwe Baruch in Hebrew. My name is Abigail. We continue with the series entitled Flee Babel, and as we are going through this series to Flee Babel, in particular we're looking at three segments that led to Terach, Abram's father, and his household fleeing Chaldeans, or the Ur of Chaldeans, and fleeing to Haran. We started by looking at the birth of Abram, that also triggered the a threat to Nimrod, and then we looked at 50 years down the line when Abram was 50, how he destroyed the Elohim, or the mighty ones, that his father had carved 12 mighty ones, 12 idols of wood and stone, which he had was worshipping per month, for each month. And this is quite interesting as I'm thinking about this situation now, that Terach, Abram's father, had 12 Elohim dedicated for each month, and that he was serving for that particular month. And if we look at our times, the months, majority of the months of the years that we have, based on the Gregorian calendar, are actually named after a particular deity, after a particular idol. I think there are only maybe 2 or 3, because how many months in a year that are linked to only numbers, not deity? It's, I think, October,
November, December.
2, only 3. Those are the ones that specific. September as well. So there are 4
that I can think of on the spot,
that are linked on the numbers, not any deity. September, October, November, December, right? But so,
and maybe August, but I'm not sure.
yeah, but majority of the other months are actually probably looking at about 8 months, if not 7, thereabout. But majority of the 12 months of the year are linked to a particular idol, linked to a particular deity. So that's why when it talks about fleeing Babel, and I spoke about earlier on that the system of Babel is still operating in our times, and we need to be able to see that which was happening then is still happening now. And when you look at how Yahuah when in his creation he worked, he did not name the months. He actually called the months by number. So it would be like, if you read the book of Leviticus, Leviticus chapter 23, or the book of Leviticus 23, where it speaks about the appointed times, it tells us that on the first month of the year, second month, he talks about months that the first month of the year, that's when the Yisrael left Mitzrayim, because on the 14th of the first month, that's when Passover happened. But it talk about numbers. Then the third month, that's when we celebrate the Feast of Weeks. It's the third month. And then the seventh month, that's where we celebrate the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Tabernacles. But it's all about months, the numbers, not names. But then the pagan then come and then name these months according to their idols, according to their deities. It's the same also with the days of the week. Yahuah said, first day, the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day. They are numbers. I think it's only Shabbat that is actually, which means seventh, which links to rest, that has a number, but sorry, a name. But the rest are literally first day of the week, second day, third day, fourth week, and so forth. But then the Gregorian calendar, then they come and then they name the days of the week according to the worship of a particular deity, whether worshiping the sun, or worshiping, which is Sunday, or worshiping the moon, which is Monday, and so forth and so forth. So nothing new under the sun. It's still happening nowadays, and the challenge that we have is that, are we going to continue and say, well, everybody else is saying it, and we just go along with calling the days of the week according to the deities and the idols that are there, and calling the number of months, and calling the months according to the names of these deities and these idols, or we're gonna call the months according to the number, which, as Yahuah said, the first month, second month. Hence, I'm looking at the comparison that Shadrack had an idol for each month, and in our times there's also a deity, an idol that is linked mostly to each of the months of the, except the very few, maybe like September, October, probably November, December, that are just based on the numbers, not necessarily a particular deity. And I think, yes, July and August, they're not necessarily linked to a deity, but they're linked to a Caesar of that time. So it will be like August from Augustus, and the month of July from Julius, or Julian, I think, because from the Julian calendar, yeah, that's when Julian come about. So that's linked to a particular Caesar of a particular time, not necessarily deity, but again, and in honor of an individual as a person. Okay, with that clarity, we're now looking at the judgment that was then given by Nimrod to Abram as a result of the transgression, supposedly, that he committed of breaking his father's 12 idols. We read this from the book of MyshAL, chapter 12, from verse 1 to verse 6, and it reads, "And when the king heard the words of Abram, he ordered him to be put into prison. And Abram was 10 days in prison. And at the end of those 10 days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and the sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Abram was still in the house of confinement. And the king said to the princes and sages, 'Have you heard what Abram, the son of Shadrack, has done to his father? Thus has he done to him, and I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he stay in my presence. And behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard.' And they all answered the king, saying, 'The man who reviles the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said, and having despised our Elohim, he must therefore be burned to death.'" So they're saying that for the crime, supposedly the crime that Abram had committed, he must be hung on a tree. So this was the judgment that they were doing at the particular time. And remember what the scripture says concerning Yahuah. It says that, I think it's in the book of Galatians, that cursed is any man who hangs on the tree, and it comes from the Torah, I think in the book of Devarim or Deuteronomy, that talks about that anyone who has committed a sin in the land must actually be hung on a tree. And that is why even Yahuah himself, when he died for the sins of the world, being innocent, yet the very same people that he came for, which is Yisrael, they said that he had to be hung on a tree. He was hung on a tree. But they also spoke about that, but for the crime that he has committed, he even deserves to be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter. So this is what they then concluded. If it pleases the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both night and day in your brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it. And the king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace that is in Kasdim. And the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burnt. Now, remember, another person or people that were actually brought into the fire, also in Babel, but this was the time of King Nebuchadnezzar. It was the 3 Hebrew boys whom they changed their name. I forgot their original Hebrew names, but the Babylonian names that they were given was Shadrack, Meshack, and Abednigo. They were thrown into the furnace fire because they refused to bow down to the statue which Nebuchadnezzar had built and ordered everyone to worship. So what happened to them way down the line, way down the years, to the 3 boys in the times of Nebuchadnezzar, had happened actually earlier in the years, much earlier in the years, which Abraham was also ordered to be thrown into the furnace of fire because he had transgressed the law of the land. Now, if you read from verse 9 to verse 14, as we're still in Yasha chapter 12, from verse 9 to 14. And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, Our sovereign Adon, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king now 50 years since. So the wise men are now realizing that, wait, this is the very same man that was born from Terach 50 years ago, whom when he was born, a star came from the east and swallowed the other 4 stars that came from the 4 corners of the earth, whom we reported to you, O king, as to what had happened. And Nimrod had ordered this young man at that time to be killed. And Abram had made as if he had killed, had deceived Nimrod for Nimrod to think that Terach had killed Abram. Meanwhile, he had not killed Abram. And we continue to see how did he deceive how did Terach deceive Nimrod to think that he had killed the son, which indeed he had not. And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth, and he ordered Terach to be brought before him. And the king said, Have you heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how did you, and if you shall speak truth, you shall be acquitted? And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Terach said to the king, My Adon and king, you have heard the truth, and what the sages have spoken is right. And the king said to him, and the king said, How could you do this thing, to transgress my orders and to give me a child that you did not beget? and to take value for him. And Terach answered the king, and said, and Terach answered answered the king, and the king said, who advised you to do this? Tell me, do not hide out from me, and then you shall live. So the king is now realizing that Terach actually deceived him. He actually, because Terach did kill the child, by the way. After Terach received the word from the wise men of how Abram was born, he knew that this was a threat to him, and he ordered that Terach kills the child. And Terach, in fear and obviously loving his son, he was the son of his old age, by the way, he actually killed the child of his maiden. So his maid had just given birth also. So then Nimrod was duped into believing, was deceived into believing that indeed Terach had killed the child. Meanwhile, he'd actually killed the maid's child. And went and hid Abram. Actually, Abram was hidden for 10 years in a cave with his mother and the childminder or servant, until then he grew up, and then they moved from there. But as far as Nimrod was concerned, all this time Abram is dead. Meanwhile, it was just the maid's child who was killed by Terach. Now Abram is 50, and this is now coming out. Now Nimrod is asking Terach, why did you deceive me? Why did you lie to me? Speak the truth, and if you tell the truth, I will spare your life. And this is what now is happening. And Terach answered the king, because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time, and I took a son of my handmaid, I took the son of my handmaid, and I brought him into the king. Verse 15 to 20. And the king said to him, who advised you to do this? Tell me, do not hide it from me, then you shall live and not die. And Terach was greatly terrified in the king's presence, and he said to his king, it was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to do this. And Haran was in those days that Abram was born, he was, what's it say? And Haran was in those days that Abram was born, he was 32 years old. But Haran, okay, so I made a mistake here. I think earlier on I said Haran was Abram's brother. No, I said Haran was Terach's brother. Yes. So I made a mistake earlier on. I said Haran was Terach's brother. I even said Ngezulu ubaba omkhulu ka-Abram. And I said in English it would be Abram's uncle. But I made a mistake. It's actually Haran was Abram's brother. So Haran was Abram's older brother, because it says here that when Abram was born, Haran was 32. So Abram was younger, then Haran was the younger brother, and Haran was the older brother. So Haran was the older son of Terach. I think that's just a correction there of the mistake that I made earlier on. And that's why it talks about that the way Terach was so happy about the birth of Abram, because he was the child of his old age. As you can see that his firstborn is 32 years of age when Abram was born. So now, as the king Nimrod is angry, he says, who advised you to deceive me in the manner in which you deceived me? Then Abram lies about, and he says it was Haran, his older son. Meanwhile, Haran did not advise him. that way. And he said to the king, "It was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to this." And Haran was in those days that Abram was born 32 years of age. But Haran did not advise his father to do anything. For Terah said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Terah, "Haran, your son, who advised you to this, shall die through fire with Abram, for the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing." Now, the king, now Nimrod, is saying, Haran, your eldest son, he's going to face the same judgment that Abram is going to face, because he's the one that even advised you to lie concerning Abram. So both of them now, both Abram and Haran, are going to be thrown in this furnace of fire that has been burning for 3 nights and 3 days. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, "Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king." So what we're realizing now concerning Haran is he was undecided. He was in the middle ground. He is saying, well, I'm now starting to be convinced about the belief of Abram, but I'm not sure. So I'm gonna be on the middle lane. If Abram succeeds and prevails against this fire that has been put before him, I will surely follow him and his Yahuah. But if it doesn't, I'll continue following the king. And that is what Yahuah hates. He says, "I would rather have you either cold or hot. Because you are lukewarm, I will spill you out." Yahuah hates mixing a little bit of good, a little bit of evil. And that's what we spoke about earlier on when we were talking about Babel, mixing, or mingling. And this is what we're seeing with also Haran, who was not decisive whether you are evil or you're doing good. The word talks about it. Let them that be good continue to do good. Let them that are be evil continue to do evil. So he did not believe and make it a decision to live by that particular decision. And we will see then what happened as a result of his indecisiveness. And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran, his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram, verse 23 to verse 27. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And Yahuah loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And Yahuah came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burnt to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuah. And those men who cast him into the fire, and flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burnt, and 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire, and they came and told the king, saying, "Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments with which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which was bound is burned." Exactly what happened, how Yahuah delivered the 3 boys whose names were changed to Babylonian names, or the names of Babel being changed to Shadrack, Meshack, and Abednigo, that they were thrown into fire, but Yahuah preserved them. And even King Nebuchadnezzar says, "Did I not put 3 men in the fire. How come I see the fourth man, and the fourth man looks like the son of the Most High? So it wasn't the first time Yahuah delivers someone or people from the furnace of fire when he delivered the three Hebrew boys, Shadrack, Meshack, and Abednigo. He had done that years before, how he delivered also Abram, who was thrown into furnace fire, and he was walking about in this fire for 3 days and 3 nights not being burnt. But what does the word tells us? It tells us that Haran died immediately as they threw him into the fire, because Yahuah was not pleased with him. He was not pleased with him because of his indecisiveness. It says that, and when Terah had spoken these words to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram, and they bound their feet, hands and feet, with linen cord, and the servants of the king lifted up and cast them both into the fire. And Yahuah loved Abram and he had compassion over him, and Yahuah came down and delivered him from the fire, and he was not burnt, but all the cords with which they bound him were burnt, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burnt to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuah. His heart was not right with Yahuah. He was gambling. Which way is it going to go? And this is why Yahuah hates anyone who is not making it. Deserves to say, I will go with him no matter what. And when we read the book of Genesis, we hear that Haran died in the Ur of Kasdim. But we are also not told how did he die. We are told that Abram took his nephew Lot and raised him up. Lot was Haran's son. But we're not in the book of Genesis. We're not told how did Haran die, how did Lot's father die, how did Abram get to raise Lot, his nephew, as his own, to take him as his own, because his father, Abram, and his father and Lot's father Haran, they were thrown into fire. But Yahuah preserved Yahuah because his heart was right with him, and Haran burnt to ashes because his heart was not right with Yahuah. He was gambling with Yahuah. He was not decisive. He was not saying, no matter what, I will follow him. No matter what, I will save him. Just like the 3 Hebrew boys says that even if it means you're going to throw us into the furnace fire, so be it, go ahead, but we will not bow down to the statue that you have commanded us to bow down to, a carved image. We will not bow down to this idol. And they are saying that even if Yahuah does not save us, we will still not bow. That's how much decisive and determined as far as worshiping and serving Yahuah, that even if it doesn't come through for us, we will not bow down to an idol carved by Nebuchadnezzar at the time. So now we get to understand how Haran died in the land of Kasdim, or in the land of Ur of Kasdim, and how later on we get to know that Abram took his nephew, which was Haran's son, and raised him with him. So we will stop there for now, and now we will then be looking at now Haran is dead. So what more then happened that caused Terah, being the prince of Babel, being the second in command and second in charge of Nimrod, how then did he flee? Because now we thought he's now saved, because they didn't throw him in the fire, but we know that they had to flee. What happened? We will look at that shortly.